Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am here with my newly acquired friend of maybe a few weeks or a month now, Katy Spencer Johnson. She is a social media strategist, and she's got a really wide background, diverse background. Most recently spent a lot of time in higher education. And I follow her on Twitter and just am really I'm learning a lot from her and what she has to say and share with the social media community. So I had to bring her onto the podcast and get her to share some of her wisdom.
I love it.
So what do you say? You got any wisdom for us?
I always have wisdom. I always have opinions. Like I'm always happy to share them.
Yeah,
Especially
great.
on Twitter. So
oh well, that's the best place to have an opinion.
Absolutely. Yep.
Unless you are like a fully verified epidemiologist and virologist, and then just don't even bother.
Yep. Absolutely. The struggle is real.
Yes. Well, Katy, I'm glad to have you on because I wanted to really kind of pick your brain about your career and the work that you've done and are doing. And I generally start all of this off by saying, where did you get your start? What was the itch that got you into marketing and social media?
Yeah, so I think I had a really non-traditional academic career path. Like I think most people in academia have, like, they land in academia and stay in academia. I started in publishing. So I was helping people write books and create content, which was amazing. And then I transitioned to nonprofit work. So that's where I started really understanding social media use, and that's where I got my start in social media. And then I was managing the nonprofit brand on social, as well as doing a lot of media relations for them. And then I kind of naturally fell into it on the higher ed side. So cool. Like the nonprofit side kind of pushed me into higher education.
And where did you go to school?
I went to Wheaton College, just outside of Norton, Mass.
Okay.
So there are two Wheatons, one in Ohio and the other one in Massachusetts. So it's a good distinction to make. And I graduated with a degree in English, which I think a lot of marketers start in English or start in, go for communications.
Right.
My background was literature, film, and race, of all things, which I tap into actually a surprising amount when you're talking about appealing to a diverse audience and writing content that is inclusion focused and accessible.
You brought up Ohio, and I spent about almost 8 years there on the faculty side. Okay. And Ohio absolutely has more than one of everything. I did work for a client once. It was Liberty Township, Ohio.
Okay.
There are 24 Liberty Townships in Ohio.
Makes it hard to be a definitive, distinct brand in that case, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. So, so to hear that there's another Wheaton College, like in Ohio, that doesn't surprise me at all.
No.
Yeah. So you have a liberal arts background. You got your degree in like a communications adjacent or affiliated field, and I'm glad to hear that you're still tapping into that for the work that you do. I really love the diversity and range of experiences that we get as social media comms people, and being able to have that background, I think enhances and augments what you do organically in that role.
Absolutely. I think I literally tap into every facet of like communication skill sets as a social media manager. My job most recently in higher education was coupled with media relations. So like I was responsible for, of course, writing press releases and understanding and evaluating risk, and then coupling that with social media strategy. So I think it's really critically important that like higher ed professionals really think about the communication skills they do already possess and how it can pivot to marketing and communications. It's huge.
So, I agree with that. And, as it relates to like professional development and things like that, what are you doing right now on the professional development side? And to preface that question, really, I feel like if you're in a marketing, communications, design field, you always have to be growing professionally. I often tell my students, you have to know a little about a lot in order to have conversations with people, let alone meaningful and memorable ones. And, a lot of that ability comes from what you're learning and professional development. So is there anything that you've got going on right now that you're trying to learn or enhance?
Oh, always. So I am looking right now actually at Google certifications to broaden what I already have in terms of my academic background. I am certified by the National Institute for Social Media as a social media strategist. So that exists as a certification that I have. But I've also been taking classes at Northeastern, looking at like resiliency and how is that effectively communicated, looking at crisis comms. So as I said, I worked on the PR side of the house. So how can you be more effective as a communicator, especially during a crisis like the pandemic?
Right.
And really, I mean, there is always going to be a facet of social media that is going to require that you stay on top of technology updates. I mean, Facebook just adding, a whole bunch of content. They updated the UX, like that's things that like not necessarily you need to know strategically, but it's something you need to understand. So then when you are building content for a diverse audience, you're not building content that's not going to help you accomplish your organizational or strategic goals. So you really do need to stay not on top of the technical, but also on top of the skill sets that make you a better communicator.
And really better storyteller.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've been really emphasizing that the past year, just the importance of storytelling. Like, you can apply all kinds of different strategies to your comms, but if you don't have a good story to tell, it just kind of falls flat, or it feels hollow or disingenuous. And, when it comes to comms, marketing, social, like, we're dealing with very savvy people, and they can see right through it if it's disingenuous, or it's not fully formed. I was going to ask you about the social media, the National Institute for Social Media, the certification. So I've been spending a lot of time researching a few things that are all tethered together. One, certification programs like NISM, Google, looking at Twitter Flight School, HubSpot, all of that, Hootsuite. And then also looking at MOOCs, or massive online open courses, curriculum, and seeing what's offered there. Because, and one thing I've discovered through the MOOCs model is that it's really unique. You can see where the sell is. So for example, on edX, you can take any course for free, but if you want the sheet of paper, right? Or really, in this case, the PDF with your name on it. You have to pay.
Which, let's be real, we can all create that ourselves.
Right. And I kept thinking about that. And I'm like, well, all right. So I signed up for a course on edX, and I had a coupon code. And if anything, I'm an informed consumer. So like I got a coupon code, ended up spending $5. And now I can have like this legitimate certification from, believe it or not, the University of Queensland in Australia. And that's nice and all, but I don't know how much that's going to affect the work I do daily. So I wanted to ask you, like, with your certification, what kind of value have you gotten out of that? How long did it take you? What were the challenges with acquiring that certification?
Yeah, so the certification process was actually pretty straightforward for me. I had already been in industry for 5 years at that point across my career in higher ed and nonprofit. So like I had really already had a pretty strong foundation in like the five main core areas that NSIM tests upon. It's related to content marketing, it's related to governance and compliance,
Yeah.
it's related to making sure that you are aligning your strategy with smart strategic goals, and making sure that your social media is supporting your organization, and that your organization is supporting social, both vice versa.
Yeah.
So it didn't take me a long time, to be honest, to do the certification. I studied on my own. It was fully online, in terms of studying, and then I just took the certification at a testing center. Um, the value in it. So I spent a lot of time really saying, do I need to be certified?
Mhm.
I have experience, like I have 6 years of publishing, 6 years of, sorry, social media management. And then I
Sure.
have also like, another 9 in content management. So like, do I really need that validation? And what it came down to for me is started to see, and this is something we see in social all the time, the thought that social media should be handled by interns, that social media strategy should be directed by someone who is making, $25,000. Like, no offense to them, but I think the certification, if anything, validates what I already do, what I already know,
Yeah.
and validates, more importantly, that the industry needs to have a standard. Now, I'm not saying NSIM and NISM is that standard, but that we need to actually set some parameters and some ground rules to really elevate social media strategy.
Mhm.
So I felt as a professional that this was a third party validation of what I already knew. I mean, and
Yep.
of course, my body of work as a social media manager speaks for itself, in terms of who I am and how I communicate. And spelling errors and all, but like, just making sure that that certification process was in place, was something that was really valuable for me. And I was able to um, use that certification to kind of justify to my organization what I could do in the role that I had. And it wasn't something that immediately promoted me. It wasn't anything like that, but it was a signal to them as to how serious I was about social media strategy. And then also it opened up an opportunity to work with the EDU Web Digital Summit. So, I had known of the Digital Summit before I was certified, but it was just a happy, confluence that I was able to work with them, both as a presenter and then eventually as a social track chair. So.
All right. So you brought up a lot of really good points that I want to touch on. So you're clearly getting value out of your certification,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think that is critical if you're going to pursue anything like that.
Yep.
And I'm of the mind that like you can have all the certifications in the world, like go get them. Like you're only going to improve yourself
Mm-hmm.
through that process. I just wish the costs were a bit more,
Yeah.
feasible,
Yep.
especially now. But
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, like you're gaining value out of a certification that others feel that they've either moved beyond
Mm-hmm.
or don't frankly need. And
Mm-hmm.
your the value you put in that gives its importance. And for someone like me, like I look at that and I'm like, maybe I should do that because
Mm-hmm.
Katy's getting a lot of value out of it. So you can sort of be a testament and speak to the value you've gotten out of it. Plus, you're able to share that and assert your dominance, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. Like, the other part to this is that the part of the world that, at least part of the career world that I came from
Mm-hmm.
as a faculty person, and I've harped on this several times on these podcasts, so if you're listening, I apologize again. But like, when you're faculty, you have to make your job is to publish and get grants and make sure your work is peer reviewed by seemingly everyone in any context. And um, I'm observing higher ed marketing on the staff side now, and I want to have that same type of value that I get out of peer review. So like all the work that I'm doing, I try to make it as good as I possibly can because I want to submit it to EduWeb and Higher Ed Web and Podathon and all of these other things. And I'm finding that like some people are just like, you know what, I'm done for the day. I'm good.
Yeah.
and I understand that I may be like a special snowflake in this respect, but I don't know what your read on this is. So I'll ask, do you think that folks in the higher ed marketing sort of environment should be submitting their work to present or to competitions? Should they be having more pride in it? What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we learn best from each other. This is a space where best practices are evolving as quickly as the technology. So I feel like the more that we can lift each other up, both professionally and, you know, personally, the better off our institutions will be. And I think, so case in point, like I'll give an example. I presented at EduWeb for the first time. It was the first time I had ever presented. It was the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to put this out there and this is terrifying. And maybe I'm not, you know, as good as I, you know, pretend to be. Hello, imposter syndrome. And
Yeah.
so I presented on marketing to the student journey. So working at a 2-year community college, there is a distinct disadvantage just because you have a shortened time frame in which to engender your students to be your fans and then to engender them to be your advocates. So we presented on that, one of my colleagues and I, and then literally a month later, after the presentation was given, I was contacted by the Journal of Educational Advancement and Marketing, and they wanted us to publish, which is huge. And so coming from the publishing background and working in higher ed on the administrative side, I was like, okay, this is interesting. Like I never would have thought like you would want me to publish, of course, in an academic journal. Like I had been publishing blog content as long as everyone else has been, but it was an opportunity for us to say like, yes, we have thoughts and best practices on the student journey. We have thoughts and best practices on marketing, and we have thoughts and best practices on social media strategy and development. I think that it's critically important for us to celebrate our successes, be it on Twitter or, you know, going so far as putting together a presentation, participating in a webinar, even going so far as publishing. I think there is a lot of opportunity for people that are working not necessarily as thought leaders right now, but who are working quote unquote in the trenches of marketing, to really highlight some really innovative and I don't want to say beautiful, but it is really like emotional content that is resonating with people, you know. And I think we're coming back to this concept of like, be genuine, be real, you know, be engaging, like, and as you said before, being a storyteller, like there are some amazing stories that are being told. And I think marketing professionals can do a better job of telling their story in addition to telling the brand story.
Right. Yeah, not everything is ad copy. And, you know, we really want to be, I enjoy telling human-centered stories, even if they're slightly off-brand. Like if you were a student and you had a captivating story that had nothing to do with admissions marketing, but it was just a good story to tell, and you're a part of our family, I want to tell that story. Like we have a champion boxer woman student. She just graduated. Awesome story. Has nothing to do with the business college other than her being a badass. And so like, you know, I was able to tell her story and that was really great. And I actually wanted to go out to where she practices and like get video of her like sparring with her coach and stuff like that. But nevertheless, like that's a great story to tell that is just unique and fun. And I don't feel like we get a lot of opportunities like that because at the end of the day, it's like, what do the metrics say? What's your data say that's informing your strategy? And we don't get to tell stories just for the sake of telling those stories. And I have to remind folks every now and then that if you keep zigging, right, you keep making left turns, occasionally you need to take a right, or zag rather. And sometimes it's when you zag that you get the most engagement or impressions or interest. So yeah.
Yeah, I think data tells an interesting story, but it is not the only piece of that. So the more that you can educate your leadership on social media strategy, being data driven, but also human focused is critical, because you are not speaking to students who only understand numbers. You're speaking to students who really want to understand the culture of a college, right? They want to understand the emotional appeal of what's going to happen when I'm on campus. Who will I meet? And so those human interest stories, the ones that we have trouble telling sometimes because of enrollment goals or admissions priorities and strategies, which is super important, obviously. But you need to,
or FERPA.
Or FERPA. You gotta watch out for FERPA. We could talk about FERPA, or maybe we can't. So no, just being able to really balance those out with a data-driven approach and a human approach is gonna only better your brand. In terms of the stories that you're able to tell, and also meeting those strategies, both qualitative and quantitative goals.
Yeah, it's just interesting how all those things converge, and we have to produce in reaction to that. And especially on the higher ed side, you have to really rely on your data and your metrics. But again, sometimes you just have to learn to say no, we're just going to ignore this low engaging post right now, because it'll build into something better or more substantive.
I think you also have to think about risk too, right? Like risk aversion in your college, or really in any organization. How risk adverse are you? Are you willing to take, a slightly bigger risk on content that you're not sure how it's going to go? It might fail entirely. You don't have any data points to back it up, but it also might be hugely successful. So being able to kind of break out of that content box or that siloed marketing perspective can be really beneficial, both from a creative storytelling side, but also from a marketing side. It gives you an opportunity to explore both the technology side of the house as well as the storytelling side of the house, being innovative with the resources and tools that you have, and as well as working with the people that you work with.
And one of the things that I think bothers me, and I would hope bother you too, is complacency and being static. So I left my tenure position on good terms. Everything was fine there. Just wanted to work back in Pittsburgh, and I'm at Pitt Business, so I market the undergraduate programs. And when I was looking at the whole Pitt Business landscape before I interviewed and everything like that, I was thinking they got to take some risks. They got to do some fun things. And then I looked at other business colleges, and it was kind of the same thing. It's just I understand that the business schools aren't inherently visual like the engineering schools or, the creative and performing arts schools, and even the health sciences. But I definitely believe that there was some capability there, and you just have to tap into the resources you have the most of, which would be your human capital, and tap into their stories. So how do you make a business school very, very visual? And that was one of the sort of premises I worked under in my interview. And we can do some really cool looking things that are genuine and true and honest, and kind of lift everything up. And so I've had a lot of opportunity to kind of throw risk aversion out the window, and just create things, which is really resulted in some interesting observations. So when you're working on your team, it helps to have folks that have different types of personalities or even focal points. So for example, my supervisor is very data driven and analytic, as well as he should be. So I'm able to bring some vision and give it some shape and mold that visually and with the writing. And then he looks at the number side. So we're not butting heads. We're interlocking.
Working together.
Yeah, we're working together. We're interlocking, and it's been successful.
Awesome.
What do this is more of a question I think targeted for the students that are hopefully listening. What do you look for in the personality traits or even the skill sets of your team, your marketing peers, or even your supervisor? What are the kind of qualities that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely not like you suggested, compliance. Like, I really want someone who is going to understand, like, who's able to take some risk. I think the data analytics side is critically important too. Being analytical, being ultimately creative, but in a way that doesn't sacrifice quality or pander to the trends that we're seeing in social. Like, I do not want to be cookie cutter social media. I think a lot of higher education, unfortunately, looks at their competitors and says, okay, what are they doing as their baseline for their marketing strategy? So I prefer someone who's going to come in and say, okay, I saw this piece of content that somebody did in an entirely different industry, and I want to make it our own. How do we do that? So somebody who's innovative, who's constantly looking to explore new ways to communicate, both effectively, like in print collateral even, and on social. Like, I think somebody who can really understand the big picture is hugely valuable. And it's not something that everyone on a marketing team needs to understand, but it is a huge quality to have in order to understand, okay, this person's working on this website design with a landing page, and and then social media, they're doing this over here, and like, how are we collectively, cohesively working on our independent parts to tell a story as a whole? And then if you add in video development and really community development, you really need someone who's going to understand all of that rolling into each other. I was blessed when I worked at Quincy College to work with a team that was siloed, and I'm not saying siloed in a bad way. We each had our own independent skill sets. I was the social media strategist and media relations. We had a website developer. We were a team of 5, so we were really close knit. So it was a really nice, happy confluence of not only personality traits, but also technical skill sets. So we could benefit from, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Because this is what I am seeing as a not only human being interacting, but this is what I'm seeing as a consumer. And this is a message that I want to tell and a story that I want to tell. So how do we get there? So I really value team members who not only can see the bigger picture, but can, stay on top of their own, subject areas and their own passions, and then translate that into the marketing office and that where you're working.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that's I think an ideal. And I feel like if I were in that situation, I would be thriving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really easy, I think, to get bogged down into the minutia and the details of the marketing aspect of things, especially with higher ed. And, there's a fair amount of politics that can be wrapped inside of that. And, it gets convoluted and self-defeating, right? So this idea of a very functional, multidisciplinary team that's thriving is exciting, because I'm not seeing a ton of it, right?
Yeah.
I often thought, like, well, I have a background in entrepreneurship. I've owned 3 companies, sold them. I'm on my 4th now. And anytime I've had employees, I've really emphasized like that personal and professional development. So like, all right, yeah, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week at the most, like, why don't you just go do something, like, even if it's like go to the museum, like I'll pay for it. Like just go learn something and bring that back to the table. So I'm really fascinated by what people know by default on your team in this context, what they know and what they want to know, and how that can improve the whole. So like, if I ask your web designer, let's say I'm on your team, I ask your web designer, like, hey, why don't you go down to that art gallery and just, go get a coffee and just kind of waste an hour, tell me what you learned. Like we might be able to find something like kind of just unique and then apply that to our marketing.
Absolutely.
And I don't know about you, but I'm not seeing a lot of that as sort of incentivization there.
Yeah, I think obviously higher education's tough, right? Because you're obviously subject to budgets that are almost always in a fluctuation based on enrollment. And now with pandemic, it's incredibly difficult. So the first cuts are usually at professional development levels.
Sure.
So, and it's very difficult unless you are the type of worker or, professional where you are always learning in some capacity. Like if you're relying on your organization to provide you that opportunity, unfortunately, I don't think that's the best way to go, because not for a lack of them wanting you to grow as a professional, but it's generally a lack of availability to help you financially. So finding those resources that are free, especially as students and lifelong learners, can really help you, both in terms of your, academic growth and then your professional growth. It is, I think, one of the most profound things I watched, and my boss shared it with me years ago, was this video where they followed a marketing team from their door in their office to a pitch meeting. And they then showed the pitch for a marketing campaign. And literally they then broke the pitch down by what content they had consumed from the door that they left to the pitch meeting. So like, for example, that marketing campaign had a stop sign. Well, they saw a stop sign, on their way from their door to the meeting. So like that clearly, so like the whole point was, we all consume content on a regular basis. We all can learn new skills on a regular basis. And even if it's not quote unquote professional development, it's still something that's going to inform your work. I constantly would tell my social media teams, I don't care if you are following other higher education. I mean, you should obviously on social, but I care what content you're looking at from a personal level. So if you can, I'm an open water swimmer. So like if you can look at, for example, a wetsuit brand and take some kind of inspiration from that and bring it back to the table. It's tremendous. I mean, and that kind of like passion translates to your marketing, even if it's not something that's directly related to your higher education or marketing campaign.
You know what I look at for inspiration, and it's not related to higher ed at all. I look at illustrations.
Totally. Yeah.
That's almost all I look at anymore is on Instagram specifically. I look at illustrations that people are making, and I look at how they use line, shape, color, and it's like, oh, I want to do that. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in one of my many career trajectories, so when I was in publishing, I worked on the animation and 3D list. So one of my authors were Disney animators who were both old school 2D animators all the way to 3D animation. So like being able to understand like the breakdown of a line in color, both in an emotional appeal as well as like an artistic visual element, is tremendous. So I'm like super thrilled you're using illustration.
Oh, the depth of feeling you get, I mean, as the creator or even as the viewer, I mean, it can be very immersive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just captivated by all the different types of artists out there that are illustrating. And when I with my first company, I made it a point to only hire designers that yes, they could design and they could use the software, but they needed to be good illustrators.
Yep.
And the rationale for that wasn't so much that they can make appealing artwork. It's that their brain works a little bit differently. They perceive the world slightly different than I do, that you do.
Yep.
And that informed the center.
Absolutely.
Shaped the center, and I was able to grow a lot from that. So okay, so switching gears, I want to know what's the one thing that especially in higher ed marketing, what's the one thing that higher ed marketing could do that it hasn't? Like, have you had this grand idea, this, like, what's the one thing that we could do and it would be awesome, but no one's ever done it, or some people have and failed? What do you think?
If I had that idea, I probably would be, still employed in higher ed. No, I wish I do. I think there's so many people that are doing really innovative virtual spaces right now. So like it's been done, but I'm most eager to see how higher education evolves in the virtual space, in the AR space, in, like, as we talked about, creating immersive experience. I don't necessarily have any background in that whatsoever, apart from working with 3D authors. But I think being able to continue to explore the opportunities available for those kinds of like virtual spaces, especially during a pandemic, especially during like an online push for online education. I think there is more opportunity there, both on the tech side as well as on the how does Marcom work with that technology outside of a vendor. How do you build and how do you bring that skill set in-house to be incredibly valuable for you? And then how do you pivot that to not only benefit, for example, virtual tours, but how do you take that technology into the classroom to utilize, for example, biotechnology, looking at the development of pharmaceuticals? Like, can you utilize that in a classroom, that virtual AR space, for education as well as for admissions?
Right.
It's something that I think is interesting. I don't necessarily know if it's new, shiny, pretty, and that whether or not it will change as education evolves. But I think, no offense to TikTok, but I think, that kind of investment in technology and marketing might be a little bit more sound than, another social media platform.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially with all the things that they're adding into those platforms. So, last night my wife and I were sitting on the couch, and she's like, she had the Facebook app open on her phone. She's like, what the hell is this? I forget what it was called, like Meet or something. And
the
like,
new breakout rooms. Yep.
The new breakout rooms. That's Facebook's version of Zoom right there.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't want this. or like, well, it actually might be useful. So they're adding a lot of functionality to the apps that we're using to do our work. And I think, to your point, I'm a bit concerned about function bloat.
Yeah,
just trying to jam pack all kinds of functionality into these singular applications that we're forced to rely on. The AR space is really, really exciting. So interestingly enough, I think that the promotional products space is still viable, and perhaps more so now than ever. I've had a lot of conversations with promotional products people, and interestingly enough, like, they're thriving right now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I think for me, my interest is in designing some of those products, and having some fun with that. But nevertheless, so getting towards the end of the call here, I want to get your thoughts on what's happening now. So you've been working from home for a couple months, just like I have. And we're trying to, work remotely in some cases that, that doesn't, work out. Yeah. And the students that I've had this past semester, you know, they've gone from very enthusiastic and enjoying the class, enjoying their semester. It just plateaued.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was speaking to a student the other day who had said something to the effect of, my career has been canceled.
Oh, that breaks your heart.
Yeah, it's awful feeling. And there's very little that, you know, you can do about the situation that we're dealing with. But I tried to tell this, you know, this particular student, like, there's still a lot that you can do. So, you know, from your point of view, what could a marketing, design, communications student do, especially, you know, if they've had an internship canceled or they've had a job offer rescinded? What could they be doing right now to build their career amidst an economy that can't support them?
Yeah, I think it is heartbreaking to suddenly have your semester completely upend, and to like reestablish a normalcy is really difficult. So I think the first point is to give yourself some space to process that. It is very difficult emotionally, and especially if you're graduating, to kind of move through that. But once you do kind of reach a space where you're like, okay, I'm ready to move forward, because to be honest, if you move forward too quickly, it might be add fuel to the fire of being too overwhelming. So you kind of want to surround yourself with people and have conversations, involve your support network, and then decide how you want to move forward. But I think doing things like, even if you don't have your internship, doing a podcast, getting experience, even if you want to host a podcast, if you want to be a guest on a podcast, if you want to continue to write, there are so many avenues that you can pursue as a marketer. And I know that everyone has opinions. So like being able to share those opinions in an intelligent way, in a valuable way. I continually tell people, you know, before you put out any piece of content, you want to ask yourself, am I being visible? Am I being valuable? Am I being available? So, you know, you want to make sure that whatever you produce is going to help not only yourself, but help somebody else. So being able to take that loss and turn it into a positive is going to be critical. And I think there is so many free resources, you know, conversations you can have with professionals in the field. I'm happy to have a conversation with any student at any point in time. I'm very chatty on Twitter. So, you know, I think it's just a matter of reaching out to the people in the field that, to be honest, potentially have lived through recessions. When I graduated from college, we were in a recession. So like,
same here.
You know, so like we kind of know what that feels like. And so being able to connect with those people, build those skill sets in a different way than what you thought. And the point is being able to pivot and being resilient and kind of building those skill sets of resiliency for yourself. But first and foremost, start with taking care of you and then work towards some passion projects. You know, I mean, I think there's so much opportunity for students in this space to be visible and valuable and available. You know, it's incredible.
Yeah, you know, and that's sort of what, you know, along the lines of what I've been telling them is that, like, on the, you know, immediately you feel like there are no jobs out there.
Yeah.
Right. Eventually those jobs will come back. It may take a while. So how do you pivot from that? How do you convert, you know, that negative energy that you've got and push that into something positive and progressive for yourself? And, you know, depending on who it is, and I think for me, I look at it as a student on student basis, case by case basis. But I've told some students, like, hey, you know, now's a really good time to figure out what you don't want to do versus what you want to do. So for example, like, you know, some of my colleagues would say to the marketing students, like, go get a job in sales. If you want to be a CMO someday, you need to know sales completely.
Yep.
Well, sales jobs aren't attractive because you have to meet your metrics, and if you don't, then you go away. But you know, I've done sales, you know, with my own companies, and I've gotten a lot of value out of that. In fact, it's taught me to be more extroverted than I already am.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's fun, you know, client acquisition, excuse me, can be a lot of fun. So, you know, so like to some of the marketing students, like consider sales. Doesn't work out. That's fine. You kind of get a pass because nothing makes sense right now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You know?
I think being exploring your options is critical, you know, and just being flexible to whatever experience you can gain at this point, you know.
And I had a colleague once who I had went to for some career advice because I was in a PhD program and I wasn't really feeling it. And you know, I told him, like, you know, I've always wanted to go to get, I never thought I would be going to college with where I went to school with my health condition. I never thought I'd get an associate degree, a bachelor's, a master's. I never thought I'd be at the PhD level. And I got into a program and then I realized, like, I'm here and I don't know what all of my energy is going to result in.
Yep.
And I'm like, how do I bounce back from that? And he's like, well, you know, you don't have to put it on your resume. It's not like you have to put it on your gravestone. So it's like, you know, if to some of the students, like, you know, try something new. And if it doesn't work out, don't put it on your resume.
Exactly.
You know,
if you want to be gaps.
and if you want to hedge your bets, like do a certification class or something just to show that you were still busy on the marketing side or whatever. And so, you know, I think that there's great opportunity for that. For example, you know, since I've been in self-isolation, I've been doing a lot of yard work and planting and stuff like that. And I kind of have a green thumb, but what I realized is that I am not good at carpentry at all. At all. I should not do it. Which is ironic because as a designer, you would think I'd have the capability to design even like a simple platform. And like, it's bad.
The translation, it's lost in translation. It's okay.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah, something gets lost there. But yeah, that's really great advice. So at any rate, if folks, you know, the other thing that I wanted to ask you about actually is entrepreneurship. And how do you think, you know, I think with the recent graduates, especially in this generation, like they're very savvy with social media. They know a lot more than they let on. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of people that are going to discover, like, you know, maybe I should just do this on my own and be a freelancer, or they start their own company. And I absolutely love that. What would your recommendations be for someone that wants to be a social media consultant or marketing consultant?
I think work on your personal brand first. Understand what value you can provide. So, you know, there are so many social media consultants in existence right now that are
they're all experts.
And they're all experts. Don't call yourself a ninja. Don't call yourself a guru. Like, don't, you know, like, just, I think understanding your value proposition as a marketer and really understanding what you like to do as a marketer. So for example, I'm a nerd and I love social media audits because that gives me a data foundation in which I can build my content. And it's actually a space for common language when working with clients. So being able to say, like, here's your data, here's our strategy, let's marry it together and have a beautiful existence on social. You know, but really understanding what you like to do and where you want to grow as a social media consultant, or even as a marketing consultant. Like, don't just pigeonhole yourself as I'm only social media. You have so many unique skill sets that even if you have a focus in social, you can write content, you can write copy, you can take the copy skills that you have and translate that into media relations, copywriting. Like, you know, there's so much that you could do. It's just a matter of really understanding what skills you can provide, what skills you want to provide, and then really pivoting that to your personal brand, selling yourself, not being afraid to sell yourself, and understanding, going after the clients that you really want to work with. and maybe it's just me, but like I'm really mission driven when I'm working with people. Like I want to, if I need to care about what you do in order for me to work with you. And you know, I'm not one of those people who's just like, yeah, I'm in it for, you know, whatever, I'm going to help you. I really need to understand your mission, how it's helping other people, and then how I can fit into that mix. So that's, you know, I think as a consultant, you kind of need to really understand yourself before you can help other people. So being able to work on that now and make sure that your branding, your personal branding, applying your marketing skills to yourself across all of your channels. So LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and, you know, and making sure that you are selling you is critical.
Awesome. Well, I can't think of a better way to end it than there.
Selling yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if there's one thing I've learned as a faculty person is that you absolutely must be your own best advocate. You become, not all people, but if you're good at what you do, you become really a master of your own branding. And, you know, I think artists, marketers, comms people, design people are exceptionally good at that. I mean, in our fields, I think we know who we consider to be the superstars are, you know, and we know that because they're very good at branding themselves. Absolutely. But not just that, they're also good at following through on the back end of that. So Absolutely. they've got the approachable front end, and then they provide good content or good leadership or good direction. And, you know, they're great at that. And some people, that's all they do. And that's great. So, you know, and, you know, with the personal branding, like that comes over time. And, Absolutely. You know, just despite the fact that like you may have just graduated, you have a lot of advantages, Absolutely. Especially if your work, like if you want to be a social media consultant, right? You can tap into nonprofits, you can tap into small businesses, practically anything. You know, and there are a ton of small businesses that have no idea what they're doing.
Really need help. I think, and especially as I think the pandemic rolls out, like, and we've seen it where organizations have really different approaches to crisis communication. So if you can position yourself as, I can speak intelligently to your audience about what is happening in your right now, currently, and then I can build you a strategy that is going to be not necessarily pandemic proof, but will be resilient and respectful and will help you grow, even during a time when potentially there is no growth. You know, I think that is so important to understand, and that you shouldn't, as a new graduate, you shouldn't pigeonhole yourself. Just because you thought you were going to go into higher ed, for example, doesn't mean that that is the only avenue at which you can utilize your skill sets. So being really open to that, both as a consultant as well as a professional, it can only serve you so well. It's amazing, like so much opportunity.
And that's the point.
There you go.
That's the point to end on.
So much opportunity.
Yeah. All right. This was great. Thanks, Katy. And if folks are interested in learning more about you and your experiences, how can they get a hold of you?
So I'm on Twitter at KDB_Spencer. So feel free to follow me. I'm happy to have conversations, and thank you for the opportunity. It was great to chat with you.
Yeah, this was fun. We'll do it again. Thanks.
Absolutely. Awesome.